Mr. Schmied is an internationally respected astrophilatelist from Zurich, Switzerland, with over 3 decades of experience in the field. He also serves as a Swiss delegate to the FIP Commission for Astrophilately and has been a bureau member of FEPA. He's also the current president and editor of Space Phil News, and Christian exhibits widely at FIP at national level and is well known for his award winning collections and public lectures on space and astrophilately. Thank you so much for being here with us, Mr. Schmid. It's indeed an honor to have you on our talk.
I often, as an astrophilatelist, you get confronted with many people. What is this? What is astrophilately? I have no idea. So I took my exhibit from Space Race. It's really called the first step on the moon, first people step on the moon. And I took this exhibit and just mixed it with the actual things. And this is what I'm going to show you. I will show you steps that were important to bring people on the moon and how an astrophilatelist can show this in his exhibit. So, to start with, what is astrophilately? An astrophilatelist documents space events. That's basically it is. We don't show just beautiful pieces. With the things we show, we want to document the space voyage. We begin, for example, the official term is an official postmark from an official post office from the day of the event, from the nearest post office of the event. For example, if something happens and the rocket gets launched from Kennedy Space Center, we want to cancel from the Kennedy Space Center. And then, as soon as the rocket has left the tower, it's due to mission control. So we want to cancel a postmark from mission control. And then finally, the rocket lands on Earth. And then we want to cancel a postmark from the airport, from the rocket field it lands, or in the dark ages, in the beginning, they landed in the water, so we want the postmark from the carrier, from the ship that took them aboard. So that is astrophilately. Anything else, any beautiful pictures, any wonderful caches, that's just decoration. Basically, we don't want it. And to make it worse, the people who started this, especially in the US, they also used to write the address for the people by a pencil, so they could erase it afterward. So the document gets more pristine, more clean. So this is not fake. This is not just made something. It's really, they did it like that. And a lot of times you just see empty envelopes, and if you're not used to it, you just say, well, that's all made up. But it is not, mostly. We had just made new guidelines like 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, we were allowed also to show the forerunners like Copernicus. So I started my exhibit with Jules Verne, with his beautiful book From the Earth to the Moon, where we have beautiful cancels, postmarks from France from 1950s, but that's not allowed anymore. It's really only the real thing, and this also with topic space. What is still allowed are the forerunners like Smith or Schmied that developed the rockets, although neither Smith or Schmied tried to go into space. They just had other goals. Smith, like you know in India, he wanted to bring shippings to the flooded areas, or Schmied, he wanted to bring letters to high mountains, to villages up in the mountains. Their goal was not reaching space. But this is still allowed, we can show that. But we all agree that modern space flight started with the A4 from the Germans, made by Werner von Braun in Peenemünde. And we can show that by the many letters that exist. Best thing would be an official letter like this one. This was a gift from my beloved friend Beatrice Bachmann, who was the queen of astrophilately. This is really a ordering contract. A letter was sent to a company, send us these and these parts for a compressor, and officially postmarked here from Peenemünde. So this is the top things. Of course, it would be even more perfect if the date on the cancel matches more or less a launch from one of the flights that have taken part. But of course, they have never documented any flights with cancels. It was all so secret. It was also with code names. After the first attack from the English, they also changed the name from Peenemünde to Heeresversuchsanstalt something, West, I think. It was all very clandestine. But as we know now, it was Peenemünde. And if you find any letters from these dates, it's perfect to show it with such a letter. Then came the International Geophysical Year. That was very important because this was from the United Nations, and over 67 countries participated in that, and they all said, we want to do something with research, we want to research anything, and the US and Russia both declared we want to launch a satellite. In the International Geophysical Year, we will launch a satellite. We can show this. The Americans the official Americans did nothing, but there was a private rocket club, the RRI, the Rocket Research Institute, and they really, on the first day of the International Geophysical Year, they launched a small sounding rocket and made some covers to document this. Nice. But, well, yes, it's nice, nothing more. And the Russians, they had a big conference on the last day of the International Geophysical, no, not the last day, but at the end of the IGY, they had a conference, and there they made covers with the official logo of the IGY, and so we have something. Of course, the real first thing was a Sputnik, just a small ball, metal ball, launched by an R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile. The East rejoiced, the big party in all Eastern countries, and the West was really in the Sputnik shock. For people who did not see that firsthand, I didn't. I was born in '66. But you can read that and also hear it if you speak with elder people. They really were in shock. Everybody was afraid the Russians will now attack via space or everything. The moon will be red and so on, all the stories. That was no show. Really, the Western countries were in shock. Of course, until then, the Russians were not fit yet to document this. Well, in general, the Russians were not fit at all. They first made something, and if it succeeded, if it was a success, then they produced something to show it. If it was not a success, if it didn't succeed, it never happened. Nothing to document, no proof that it existed. But when it existed, they made things, as I will show you later. Well, this is just a normal letter posted on the 4th of October on the date of Sputnik launch from a city called Vinica. And so it is a way to document the Sputnik. Soon after, just 1 month after, was Sputnik 2, already with a living being, with the dog Laika. As we all know, Laika died. As we all know now, Laika died pretty soon. And they had a problem with the temperature regulation system. The temperature got higher and higher, and after a few hours, the poor dog died. She should have lived for 10 days, and then she would have given poisoned food to quietly, peacefully put her asleep. But they succeeded. They put the living being into space, and it survived, at least for some hours. And here, now, the Russians started with their, machinery. They produced these stamps, 4 special stamps, and they also made a special, well, not really a special cancel, but there are special cancels from the Sputnik at the date of the Laika, and also again with the Vakasi. But these stamps alone are very good to document the Laika flight. The Americans responded a few months later after some accidents. They successfully launched Explorer into orbit. It was not really not a great thing. It was a very small rocket. You see on the left side, this is the actual rocket. Well, this is the Explorer. Technically, it was not, politically, it was a loss. They got defeated, but technically, it was a milestone. As with Explorer 1, they discovered the Van Allen belt, the radiation belt around the Earth. Here we have very good. The Americans were already always very good in documenting everything. We have documents for every rocket launch, even when it exploded on the pad, when it was not successful. They documented everything, and this is really the place to be these days. This is cancelled from the Patrick Air Force Base, because until then the Kennedy Space Center did not exist yet. And Cape Canaveral was also, so the Patrick Air Force Base was the best cancel at that date. And then they began exploring the moon. The Americans began by Pioneer 1. It reached only 1/3 of the distance to the moon. You see again with the Patrick Air Force Base, machine cancel. I forgot, sorry. The small one here is the machine cancel. Next flight was the Pioneer 3. Pioneer 2 was an accident. Pioneer 3, it reached again only 1/3 of the distance to the moon. And this is the hand cancel from Port Canaveral. It's also a very good cancel. The Russians responded a bit later with Luna 1. As the name says, Luna, they aimed for the moon, but they missed the moon. And so they changed it. They never wanted to go to the moon. They always aimed for the sun, because they missed the moon but reached the sun. And so Luna 1 became the first satellite to reach the sun, and send really good data. And here you see they have special cancels for the event. And then Luna 2, really they impacted on the moon. So they were ahead of the Americans. With special stamp, special cancel. Luna 3 was then the real milestone. Exactly 2 years after Sputnik flight. That's in general with the Russians. They always try to make everything on Sputnik Day, 1st of October, and later when Gagarin was in orbit, they tried to make everything on Gagarin Day. They had really a big. It was important for the Russians to hit those dates. So exactly 2 years afterwards, Luna 3 landed, and just before landing, there were some little things put out around the moon to say, we Russians, we are now on the moon. And here we have beautiful special cancellations. Also, they did the first photographs of the far side of the moon. So it's the first time mankind has seen the backside of the moon. And those pictures were developed in the satellite and then sent down to Earth by image transmission. So very advanced that was 59. And here again, with the special cancellation, you see Luna 3 making pictures of moon. And then another milestone, the first living beings can return alive to Earth. So the dogs Belka and Strelka were put into orbit and then again landed on Earth. And therefore, we have beautiful stationaries with the dogs on it. Oops, yeah. And also, of course, special stamps. But as I told you in the beginning, the stamp alone is basically not important for us in astrophilately. It's beautiful to watch, but it has no significance. For us, it's only the cancellation as close to the event as possible. A year later, the Americans sent their first animal into space and got back alive. It was the ape Enos with an atlas, the wild atlas, because the smaller redstone was only for orbit, for ballistic missions, and only the atlas was fit enough to fly into orbit. So Enos was the first American in orbit. And there we have these beautiful, it's like a document, it's a four-paged souvenir sheet with Port Canaveral, and of course the Patrick Air Force Base with this nice gauche. And also like a speciality for the real astrophilatelists, you only can divide liftoff and landing by the cancel. The liftoff has an AM cancel and the landing has a PM cancel because it happened both on the same day. So it's very important to watch the details. AM is for the launch and PM for the landing. Next, Gagarin, 12th of April, 61. First human into space. That was before the Americans had an animal back to Earth. The Russians already had the first man into space. We know the story. Gagarin was celebrated as a hero worldwide. And this is the typical Gagarin cancellation. But of course, that was also the moment when the real forgeries began. I just want to show you here, for example, how you can tell it's a forgery. This Gagarin cancel, it existed in red and black. But here you see on the number 4, the 4 is very different and the Y is different. So that's one thing, how you can tell if it's a real and original or a forgery. But it's very tricky. Of course, the American responded, but only with a ballistic flight, as I said, with the Redstone, Alan Shepard. Just 15 minutes, whoosh, but he reached space. So they did the first move into space. Then came, I forgot the letter, just normal launch letter with Patrick cancel. Then Mercury Atlas, the big one, 4. They did not dare to put a human being in it yet. But for this mission, as it was the first orbit, they had to establish the whole network around the globe. So they put like a speaking robot. It was just a box that was talking nonstop. And so from all over the world, they tried if they can hear it, if they can catch the data from the capsule, if they can control the data and everything. And only after this, they really launched the first American into orbit. John Glenn, not a hero, but, well, of course, not so known as Gagarin. He was the first American to orbit. This is the first day cover. This is something we don't really want to collect as astrophilatelists, only because it was given out on the day of the event, on the 20th of February. We can show it, because of course we are not very proud. We prefer a normal letter without this stamp, just a normal with any normal stamp. And now also here with the landing of Glenn, we have something very special. You cannot say forgery; it's a backdating, because as I told you, this stamp was given out on the 20th of February. So on the ship that took Glenn aboard, the USS Noah, the ship left on the 11th of February. They did not have that stamp on board. And then when the flight took place, they had to cancel with normal stamps. And also they were quite in a hurry. They had no time. So they did all the cancellations very sloppy. And it's funny, but you can tell by the sloppy stamps, by the sloppy cancels, and the missing Mercury stamps that this is an original one. And if you find, and you will find many, 20th of February USS Noah with the Mercury stamp, you know technically it was not possible, so this was backdated. And down, this is on the 23rd of February. That was the date when the stamps actually came on board the ship. And that's where the cool cover to show. If you want to show it, if you have enough space in your exhibit, you can show this one. That's the date when the stamp came on board the Noah. Of course, now the famous speech of Kennedy. We choose to go to the moon. That was in 1962. That was before the Americans even had nothing. It was just a pure political goal. They wanted to go to the moon. So they knew they have to develop the places, the rocket bases. They have to develop the mission control center. They must make long stay missions. They calculated the moon mission will last 10 days. So they set the goal to 14 days. We must be able to stay in space for 14 days. They must be able to dock into space, and they must be able to work outside an aircraft, outside an capsule, an EVA. Just to show you 1-2 slides. Above, that's Cape Canaveral in 1962. You see? Nothing, basically. That was then in 1967. A whole lot of, you see here, all those launch places were built in 5 years. The big VAB, everything had to be built. The vehicle assembly building, everything was put out of nowhere in a hurry. And also Houston, that was in 1962, and below in 1967. The whole mission control, the whole training facilities. The Russians, of course, they kept on. They made a group flight, Vostok 5 and Vostok 6. And one of the two was Tereshkova. She was the first woman into space. And she stayed the first woman into space until 1983. So all the others were just American or Russian pilots, fighter pilots, all men. Here we have beautiful stamps. And of course, a special cancel with the two. Then came Washout, the first capsule with 3 people in it. So the Russians had 3 people in space before the Americans even had a capsule for 2 people. And another first, only one of them was a cosmonaut. The other 2 were civilians. One was an engineer and one was a doctor, a PhD. So they really wanted to put the focus on exploring, not only on political, but also on exploring. Also here, special cancellation and special stamps. Washout 2, they just took the washout capsule from the flight before. They left empty the middle seat and they put an inflatable tunnel on the middle seat. And so when they were in space, they inflated the tunnel and one of them, Leonov, crawled out on a leash, of course, and made some minutes outside his capsule. America, an absolute first again for the Russians. On the landing, they had a little problem, and they had to spend 2 days, 2 nights in the wild before they were discovered by the rescuing helicopter. Here, very nice, with of course special cancellation with the EVA and also special stamp for the event. Gemini. As I said, the Americans had to do EVA, docking, and long-term missions. So they began with developing the new rocket. They took the Titan and they made it fit for the capsule. So they developed the Titan II. The first one, already the first flight was a big success. It flew over 5,000 miles. Then the next combination with the Gemini capsule was also a success. Next one with the heat shield, they tested the separation of the capsule, and the capsule returned, and it all went good. So it was given free for passengers. GT3 was the first 2 per people capsule for the Americans, a big success. And also the Intrepid, the aircraft carrier, was only 30 minutes away. So picture book everything. You have the Cape Canaveral launch cover, and here the first time I show you an Intrepid and ship recovery ship cover. Then also the Americans made an EVA, and this was the first mission that was orchestrated from Houston. Until this mission control was also in the Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, because the mission was not fit yet. And this was the first manned mission to be controlled from Houston. But that's also a little astrophilatelic thing. The post office at the Houston mission control was not finished yet. So every evening, a secretary had to go by car to the next village next to the mission control that was called Webster, and bring all the postings to Webster, to the Webster post office. To really document this, the perfect cancel is from Webster. Only as from the next mission, we have the Houston cancels. GT7, almost 14 days. So it was really, the goal was set, reached, sorry. Here we have a beautiful official NASA cachet. And these cancels, this was really a rubber cache. That's the official NASA thing. So these, as cheap as they look, those are the best things you can collect. If you find a cover with one of those, that's official. And all these official NASA caches, they were only given out at Kennedy Space Center. So you will never see a NASA cache with like Cape Canaveral or something else. That's the best thing you can show. GT8. The third goal we have to reach was docking of two vehicles in space. And so with Gemini Titan 8 was the first time they reached that. The pilot was Neil Armstrong, which of course you know. Unfortunately, they had a problem. Well, here is the one day before, well, a few hours before, that's the launch of the target vehicle. And that's then the launch of the capsule. They had a problem. As soon as they docked into space, the whole thing got spinning, and even more spinning until they almost fainted and would have died. So in one of the probably last seconds, they cut the connection and managed to slow down the rotation. And of course, they used all the fuel, so they had to return back to Earth, but alive, and lessons learned. And so that's one of the rare missions where not the official intended recovery ship, the Boxer, was token, because this one was in Atlantic, but the emergency landing took place in the Pacific, and it was in fact Leonard Mason who took the astronauts on board. You see, another one of those examples why an astrophilatelist is so important to document everything. He must learn the things. What happened in this mission? How did it go? Where did they start? Where did they land? And that's also why it is so cool. You spend hours researching, and of course today with the internet it gets easier and easier. But as you may know, internet is not always wrong. There are a lot of fake news also in Wikipedia. Let's go back to the moon. Luna 9. Again, the Russians were a bit ahead of the Americans. Their first soft landing was done by the Russians, but on the ninth try, Luna 1bis8 did not reach the moon, or did impact on the moon hard. They had a real problem hitting the moon softly. For over 3 years they tried. The Americans, on the other side, they were later than the Russians, but as you see, Surveyor won. On the first attempt already, it worked out. Of course, one of the goals was to send pictures, so they could choose the landing site for the first people. Another nice special cancellation. That's really something that's beautiful on the Russian space exploration. For every successful mission, they made beautiful cancels. On the other ones, no. The Americans, however, they never did something special until the space shuttle area. There they began with special cancels. Until then, it's, well, in fact, quite boring. But for us, it's the best way to document it. Then we come closer to the moon. They knew they had to build an all-new rocket, the Saturn. Saturn, as you know, was made in two different sizes. The smaller one for Earth missions and the bigger one for moon missions. The Saturn 1 was only the first stage active. The rest were dummies filled with water. So it was nothing fancy, but it's very beautiful and cool that we can document this. Then 2, 3, 4 were just repetitions. Saturn Apollo 5 was the next big step. The first and second stage were active, and also third stage was a dummy. And then they began really with the naming. So the Saturn Apollo 201 was the first flight of a totally complete Saturn Apollo, Saturn 1B, smaller rocket, everything completed, new second stage, and the payload was a dummy, but it had already the shape of the Apollo spacecraft. And again, you will recognize that's a NASA cache. That's a very rare one to document this flight. Then, of course, Apollo disaster. Officially, it was AS-204, but after the disaster, also to commemorate the 3 astronauts that got killed, they changed the name into Apollo 1. But that's only political. It never intended to be Apollo 1. As a result of this accident, they changed, I think, over 100 things in the capsule, and delayed it for a delay for over 10 months, but it was worth it. If you read books from engineers and also from the astronauts who also saw the early capsule and the new capsule, those were, well, it's a total new world. Just a commemorative cancel. Of course, also here are covers with the NASA cache, but I think there are only 10 in total, and I don't have one, unfortunately. Apollo 4, that was then the first test of the Saturn V, of the big rocket. It worked. It worked out. Perfect. Then the small again with the repetition of the Apollo 1 disaster, the 204L, also named Apollo 5. That was the first time they had a lunar model. Behind here, there's the lunar model, and there they had the lunar model on board. And they never tried, it was never intended to recover it. They just wanted to fly it, and they also had no legs. Apollo 7, the first manned rocket, 11 days, so longer than a moon landing, with the small rocket, of course, with the Apollo 1B. Everything worked out perfectly. Launch cover, recovery cover, and here with the planned, that was not the official cache, but they wanted to make a rubber cache as with the other ones, but they delayed it, and every version they tried to make was too complicated and too detailed. So finally they said, forget it, let's take a sticker. And really this bumper sticker is the official cache, has gotten the official cache, as the artful one was delayed. And here, just to show you, I told you about the many ships, and the whole ships are divided in Atlantic and Pacific fleet, as I already showed you, and each fleet had their own headquarter. The Atlantic fleet was commanded in Norfolk, Virginia, and the Pacific fleet was in Hawaii. This is a big cover from the Atlantic fleet, from Norfolk control, and for the satellite connections, for the tracking data, the earthbound villages were not enough, so they also had tracking ships This, for example, is from the ship Vanguard. And they did not even have a post office on that one. So that was posted after returning to the port in Jacksonville, Florida. But that's very show-worthy. You can show those. Apollo 8 was another milestone. Basically, they wanted to test the LEM, the lunar model, but it was not ready yet. So someone came up with the idea, why not fly to the moon, just go around the moon and go back to Earth? So we showed that it's technically possible. They can show all the maneuvers without even going to the moon. That's what they did. Land as the launch cover and landing cover from the recovery ship. Apollo 9, they tried really everything they wanted to do on the moon landing, but in Earth orbit. They did not go to the moon, but they tried everything from docking, from EVAs, a perfect simulation of the moon landing, but in Earth orbit. Kennedy Space Center, here again with the rubber gauge, and here with Houston, for example, for once from the press office during the mission, a Houston cover. Apollo 10, the same as Apollo 9, but in lunar orbit. So that was really the dress rehearsal for the moon landing. They did everything they wanted to do on the moon landing mission, just without landing on the moon. And they could not have landed because the LEM did not have any fuel in it, and I also think not a functioning rocket. Robert Gauge and Kennedy Space Center, and a nice one for the mission, during the mission from Patrick Air Force Base, which of course is not that perfect. Being during the mission, I should have one cover from Houston, but there's also have to be ways to go higher and earn gold. And then here we are, Apollo 11. I think we all know about that one. Just a few ways how to show it. This one on top here, well, let's start in the middle. This one you know. That's a normal NASA gauge with the rubber gauge. The normal envelope cover with Kennedy Space Center cancel and the NASA gauge. And this I have not talked about yet. That's the VIP cover. Well, it's not a cover, sorry. VIP postcard. This postcard was only given out by the president himself, or maybe also by the NASA officials. And this was sent for, I don't know, these days maybe to Putin or so, to the close friends. Let's see how good we are. Let's inform you that we reached that step. We are now on the moon. Of course, they also sent this to contractors. Thank you very much, McDonald's, for making this possible, and so on. That's very, very good to have one of those. And here, moon landing, Houston, on the 20th. That's the day of the moon landing, where, of course, Houston had the controls. After 3 days, they returned. And also here, speciality of the main recovery ship of the USS Hornet. The Hornet had 3 cancels on board. You can distinguish, of course, the big one, that's the hand cancel. And the smaller ones, that's the machine cancel. But Hornet had even 2 machines to cancel the covers. One with a slightly bigger ones and a bigger one, and one with a slightly smaller one. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schmied.